Okay, easy does it. Going slow, don't hit anything. What's up guys, my name is Andy. In this video, it's time to finally install my 347 stroker into my 66 Mustang. If you guys missed the previous videos where I explained the build and what I have and the internal components and all the power expectations, all that kind of stuff, you might want to check that video out. But now it's time to get it in the car. I did want to point out real quick, so one thing I didn't do was I didn't put the header on the passenger side, but I went ahead and put it on the driver's side. And the reason why, before I put this in the car, I wanted to get this on there, and I was thinking about putting both headers on here and dropping it in the car, but I don't know if I'm gonna hit the shock towers or not. I might be fine. You guys might already know the answer to that question. We're gonna find out here in a minute, but I do know that the driver's side header is the more difficult of the two to put on the car once the motor's in place. So I think we can put it in here kind of on one side and kind of shift it over a little bit and get it dropped in, and I think we're gonna be fine. We will find out. Maybe I'll have to be taking that off and redoing it. But other than that, it's time to put it in. My last video, I went through and put on the water pump and kind of explained the last couple of things I need to do with the distributor and everything, and the thermostat housing, getting all that stuff put in here, get the motor ready to go. Some of that stuff you can do with the motor in the car, but it really is easy to do when you've got it out of the car. So other than that, let's get started. I got a lot of work to do. Got to get this motor in here. I got to get the transmission hooked back up. I got to get the radiator put in, get the coolant. I mean, I got a lot of stuff to get done. So let's get started. And you guys probably recall in a previous video I went through and I had done a lot of cleanup work to the engine bay, done some rewiring, and I added the heater back into the car, so I've got the coolant hoses there and stuff. I need to worry about that. So this is a good time to get all that kind of stuff out of the way and propped out of the way and make room so that we can go ahead and drop this motor in on the motor mounts and get it set in place. All right guys, I think we got the first step in here. It seems to be sitting on the motor mounts down there, and I was able to, get this side to clear. Everything's fitting over here. I'm glad I put this on because again, this is kind of a pain to put on the car once the motor's in. So everything else looks pretty good there. I think we can go ahead and bolt the motor from underneath and then take it off the hoist and then go from there. It's kind of hard to see, but the bolts are in the motor mounts, so we can go ahead and take the hoist off. All right, we can finally let the motor down all the way, and it's going to tilt back a little bit just because it's kind of heavy in the back, which is fine. There we go. All right. Woohoo! This is exciting, guys. It's the first time having the motor in here. I am pumped. Oh yeah, now it looks real. I went ahead and stuck some towels in the intake manifold there just to keep any debris from getting in there before we put the carb on. So the next step is to go ahead, we need to put the transmission on, and that's actually gonna tilt the motor forward just a little bit. If you kind of push on it, see it kind of rocks, because it's actually kind of tilting back, which is fine because I need it to kind of tilt back to put the transmission on anyways. So I need to put the block plate on, put the flywheel on, put those flywheel bolts on. And don't forget, if you guys are doing this, to put Loctite on the flywheel bolts, because the crankshaft on these motors, the bolt holes for the flywheel go all the way through the crankshaft into the oil pan. So you'll have an oil leak if you don't put Loctite on those flywheel bolts. Then we'll put the clutch on, put the transmission in, get all that hooked up, and then we can come back up front and then put the radiator in place and make sure that I've got enough room. I went ahead and put the header on because that's 10 minutes of fighting with those bolts that nobody wants to see. And then also don't forget, when you're doing this, if you don't have a new pilot bearing, you should put a new one in there just in case and get it greased up. So what I want to do is I want to put the block plate on first. All right, because I forgot this last time I did this. So make sure we get that on there first. And then we're gonna put the flywheel on, and the bolts that we're gonna put in here, we're gonna put brand new flywheel bolts on. The other bolts that I had when the last time I was in here when I did that T5 transmission, I've only got about 600 miles on those flywheel bolts. I don't know if that's something that's okay to go ahead and use again. It's not worth the risk to me. I'm gonna go ahead and just put new bolts in here, and then and we'll be good there. So we gotta put some Loctite on the threads, and then we have to put this special lubricant that ARP supplies with these bolts underneath the head of the bolts, and then we'll thread them in here, and then we gotta torque them down to 75 foot-pounds. And there is only one way this flywheel will fit on here, so you gotta make sure that the bolt holes line up with that, because there's only one way it'll clock. All right, now that we got all those tightened up, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put in a couple of my clutch bolts to put a pry bar in here to hold this in place while I torque these down to 75 foot-pounds. There. Now we're ready for the clutch. So when you put the clutch on, just make sure that this bump part, you know, this thing that's sticking out is on the outside. Don't put it this way, it won't work. So we gotta put it on here, and then I'm gonna use my alignment tool that I made from the last video. I had an old input shaft that that wasn't the right size, so I just cut the end of it off and just made an alignment tool. It works perfect for what I'm doing, and I know that it's guaranteed to fit, and I don't even know where the plastic one was that came with the clutch, so we're just gonna use that one. And this is, again, one of those things that's kind of heavy. If you've got an extra set of hands, it's always nice to have, just to kind of line everything up. And these bolts don't need much. They only need 25 foot-pounds on them, so you could be able to hold this in place and, yeah, torque those down. All right. That's torqued down, ready to go. The next thing I want to do is put the bell housing on. Now before you put the bell housing on, make sure you grease up the shift lever there pretty good. I put some new grease underneath that ball part where it pivots. All right, now I think everything's ready to put we can go ahead and put the transmission in. I was wondering where I put these bolts. I guess I put them in the back of the bell housing. All right. Now we need to get the transmission in here, and this is probably the hardest part of this whole project, is getting this in there, especially if you're by yourself. It's not that it's hard to get in, it's just awkward to get in here. We got to tilt the motor back, got to tilt the transmission up. I've got this hydraulic stand here that this, or scissor lift stand that this thing can sit on, and that will help get everything in place, but it's just kind of a pain, so let's just get through it real fast. All right, now that we got this in, you know, I turned the camera off and I actually took this thing back out all of the way and put it back in just to make sure I got everything right. When I was putting this in there, it just didn't seem like I was fully seating it all the way, and I just want to make sure it was right. So anyways, now we're back in there. I started to hook up the parking brakes, so I can finish that here in a minute. I'm going to go ahead and hook up the drive line and get that put in, and I think we'd be done down here for now, and then we can go up top and put the radiator in. You guys probably remember I did a video a little while back about getting this cut out and set up for this radiator. And now that we can go ahead and drop it in, oh, this is good. See, before, when I was doing all this, I was worried about the distance from the fans to the water pump. And there's, I don't know, 2 or 3 inches of space in there. Plenty of room, which is fantastic. I was worried that this is going to be really close. And I don't know if I would have needed to cut out that extra part here on the core support. Well, I did because I needed to get more clearance, but I also kind of cut it back so that the radiator would sit as close to the core support as possible to get this thing tucked in. So from here, I think we can go ahead and bolt it in place, and then we can plug in the harness here, and oh man, this is looking fantastic. I'm going to reuse my overflow reservoir from when I had my other radiator, and I got a little mount set up here, so I'm just going to mount it right here, right next to the radiator. Everything's good, but first I want to plug in this hose from the radiator to the bottom of this here. And since this is not a pressurized system, you know, I don't need to worry about clamps or anything. And then I've got a drain tube that's just going to drain right out below the car here. And then we're just going to go ahead and put it in right about like that. That's sturdy, that's not going anywhere, nothing's pinched. And get this, so this is going to be good for the alternator, so good for that. And then everything's happy underneath here. That's gonna drain out. I can get to the cap. All right, I think that's good. So guys, I think this is a good place to stop for this video. What I have left is I gotta hook up the coolant hoses. I gotta put the alternator, back on. The wiring for the, the oil sending unit, the water temperature. I mean, they're just little, plug things here and there. There really isn't really much left that's exciting. So I'm just gonna go ahead and take care of that offline. And then I think the next video is fire up this motor. I've got a new carb, a new Holley's 750 CFM carb to put on here. The 4160 is the model number, but you guys will see that. So I'm gonna put that on and got a new fuel line for that. So we'll do that in the next video, and then I think we'll fire it up then. So guys, that takes care of that. If you like the video, give me a thumbs up. And if you subscribe, I appreciate it because it helps my channel out, and we'll see you in the next one.